All right, Joe, you are up.
Welcome to our scripts call. We do this monthly as part of the Synergy community at eXp Realty. Still that from Dave Reichert. I hear all his videos with the big eXp Realty, which is a script, obviously, because he does that over and over again. So it's kind of like branding. So, the last couple of classes that we've done on this, we've touched on a number of different approaches on scripting. We talked about greeting. I want to start it off with some results from people in some of the minor tweak and adjustments that they've done. And I'm so thankful that our friend Michael Herman is on today's call because Michael, if I remember correctly, after our last scripts training call, you made a few adjustments to some of the things you were doing, and it completely changed the results. So are you open for unmuting and just having a brief conversation so everybody else can share in the growth?
Yep, of course. Yeah, so I just focused on kind of the introduction and, not just filler words like asking them how they're doing, and kind of cut to the chase and then let the conversation flow. And as long as, I'm present in the conversation, it usually goes pretty good. I keep them on the phone a lot longer. Obviously, I still need more training and drilling on it, but yeah, lots of progress.
Well, Michael, to be frank, we all need more training and drilling on it. It's an ongoing practice. If I remember correctly, I saw Michael Jordan very, very late in his career, and he was on the court before anybody else, putting up jump shots and free throws and everything else. And he was already recognized as the best player in the world. So I don't think that game ever changes of improving your craft. So I want to recap for everybody else what Michael just shared. When Michael was first making his phone calls prior to our scripts training class, Michael was throwing a lot of unnecessary conversations, like he would identify himself and say, "So how you doing?" And we had the conversation in this scripts class of, they don't really want to even have a conversation about that. So stop asking it. Get right to what you need to talk about. And what I find is interesting, Michael, is that you said you were able to keep them on the call longer than you had been before. And yet you weren't asking how they were doing. So what are you going to? You give the identification, "Hi, I'm looking for whoever, and this is Michael, I'm with blah, blah, blah." What's like the next thing you're going to go into since you eliminated the how you're doing?
Fact.
Like what? Give me an example.
So if they inquired about a property on the website, I was calling because a few months ago you had registered on our website about some property that we had listed. And then, I just wanted to check in and see how that's going. And then, kind of let it flow and then ask the questions from there.
Perfect. Yeah, because you're getting into what they actually want to talk about. If they're interested in real estate, they want to talk about real estate. I want to talk to some stranger about how they're doing. And I think I jokingly said that most people, what's the answer to how you're doing? Good, fine,
Good.
right? Nobody says life's terrible. Like they just, like, so let's not spend any time there. So good, Michael. Thank you for number one, sharing that, not only with me, but sharing it here today with everybody else. But number two, being brave enough to go, all right, I need to make an adjustment on what I'm doing so you get better results. Very good.
Hey, Joe, can I reset
Thank you.
that to make sure I got it? Because I want to. This is one I think is important, and I want to make sure I've got it here too. I think what Michael's saying is, instead of saying in the beginning, "Hey, how you doing?" and waiting for them to answer that, when they start the call, he just goes straight into, "The reason I'm calling you is because you were on our website on such and such day," and he's just getting right to the point. Was that, did I catch that right? Okay. Yeah, I mean, I can see how that would be more powerful for sure.
Well, you're speaking to what they're interested in, right? If they registered on a website or they inquired on something or somehow, it's just like an expired listing or for sale by owner or things of that nature. Get right to it. Like, why are you bothering me? Are you able to hold my attention long enough, right? So if you're making like just listed, just sold calls or anything like that, if you just get right into it, it's calling for Cody. Hey, yeah, this is Cody. Cody, this is Joe. a local real estate broker with EXP. A home recently sold in your neighborhood. And we know when one home sells, usually two more are going to sell right away. So I was wondering, when do you plan on selling? Or when do you plan on moving? Right? You're either going to be interested in that conversation or not. But the first thing they're doing with their radar, like, get this, the whole world is telling us judging people is wrong. Shouldn't be judging people, but yet everything in our DNA is designed to judge, to protect ourselves from threat. It's a survival, right? And that includes the phone. Even though they can't reach through the phone and do anything to you, they're still working off of a primitive survival base. So get to what the conversation's about, so they're not viewing you as a threat. They know what you're calling about. We can move right into, I can tell you, screw you, I love it here, or nope, or, oh, it's funny, you should call. My husband and I were just talking about it, right? I mean, those are the kind of things that you'll hear. So good. All right, Cody, I think you had a couple of questions that teed up. I was hoping we had a few more people on from last time that we can kind of get feedback from them. But perhaps they'll join us in a future date. So
Yeah, well, so I mentioned last time that my hope for this is that this will be like a really safe place where we can almost intentionally crash and burn, try stuff on for size, see how it works, and get feedback from other people and just round it out. So in the summit, I shared my script for when somebody is pushing back on commission, right? So I have my 6% option, my 7% option, and I shared in there that this guy recently said, I'm Scottish, so I'm cheap. Do you have a 5% option? Okay. So what I'd like to do, Joe, if you wouldn't mind, is I'll kind of re-tee that up, explain again how I said it.
please.
If you wouldn't mind telling me what parts of it you think are good and what parts of it you don't think are good, and how I could say it different or whatever, like your feedback, I'd love to hear it. So
Absolutely.
So what I do is I first reframe it so that I know that my script is going to hit the mark, like I explained in the
Okay, so
summit.
let's clarify reframing, because we might
Yeah.
have some new people listening to this. So give me your understanding of a reframe.
Yeah, so for me, the reframe is to state their question or concern or objection in wording that puts it on the right wavelength, so that the way you're going to answer it will answer it specifically, and also just to make sure you understand it. Okay, so
And yes, and what I'm going to boil it down really simple. You're going to take the essence of what they're saying, and you're going to make it really clear in a manner that you can handle.
yeah,
So let me give you an example. I want you to cut your commission. It's okay. I may not want to go head on with cut the commission, but the essence of what they're talking about is get the most money for out of the property. And so that's where I want to reframe them. I'll say, this is perfect. Every client asks me that question right before they hire me. So just so I make sure we're clear, what you really want to talk about is how we can put the most money possible in your pocket. Is that correct? That is now reframed into a scenario where I've got multiple options.
yeah.
Good.
Okay.
Good.
So we're on the same
Yeah.
there.
I'm
because-
doing this for everybody else. You and I
Yeah.
are on the same.
Yeah, so the way I said that, I actually liked one word you used better than how I do it. So you've already partly answered the question for me. But so what I said was, usually when people say that, what they're most concerned about is how much they're going to net. Is that what you mean when you say that? And then
Perfect.
they say yes, right?
Yeah.
But I like how you said, put the most amount in your pocket. That's another, I want to add that to my repertoire, so that, like, sometimes I might say net, sometimes I might say the other
Yeah, see,
one.
net's really good for an analytical. So if you
Yeah.
have an analytical across from you, that is absolutely the right language to use. But most people can visually, remember, the mind sees in pictures. So you can visually see putting the most money in your pocket, right? That's an easy painting for somebody to imagine.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So I'm gonna practice that one too a little bit. So then what I do is I say, so what I have found is that most sellers who are looking for somebody to represent them on probably the biggest asset they own are not really looking for an agent who's in a race to the bottom of commission. What they really want is, and what I'd like to focus on is getting in a race to the top of how much you put in your pocket. Do you mind if we talk about that?
Love it.
So
You've moved it to where it's now reframed in a context of most money. I love it. Go ahead, keep going.
no, so that's what I was going to there is like, do you see anything there in the wording that you think could make that more clear or more direct or appeal to more people?
No, I think you're spot on. The only thing I would say is once you gather their agreement on that, I want to overwhelmingly get a reinforcement of how we're going to work together. Like as I start this example, if they say yes, right? I want to race to the top to get the most money possible. Say, perfect. We're likely we're going to wind up working together because that's the number one concern that people have right before they hire me.
So Joe, this is something I've heard you do now like multiple times. It's definitely not natural to me to use this phrase of most people do that right before they hire me. Now, I will tell you, I've tried it and I will say it works. I can testify that it does work, but it feels like really, it feels really salesy to me, and it's not in my nature to do it.
Don't do it. Listen, at the end of the day, if you're not comfortable picking up the phone and dialing, you're not going to get, like, you eventually either have to decide you're going to get comfortable with, or you've got to find another method. I was never comfortable holding open houses. I'm not making them wrong. It never appealed to me. So for me to spend a lot of time with that, I'm fighting a natural inclination. That doesn't mean we can't do anything. But you might be able to say, instead, you might be able to say, well, good news is most of my clients have that exact same concern. The reason why I want to put them in the most people, I want to let air out of the balloon of this commission, this net, I got to get the most. I want to deflate that a little bit to say you're normal. Like this is a conversation that we have all the time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, actually, what you just made me think of is that you can then lead it to what also is normal is that people hire me at my full amount. Like you're not going to ever say that, but they're going to know like, this is how I do like, and so this leads to how I do this. I say, this is my methodology. This is why I do what I do. And this is why I know that it works for getting you the top dollar. And so if we get you the top dollar, then all of this extra stuff only has to produce this much more in sales price to more than cover the difference in the commission that we're talking about now. So again, the result of this is you're putting more money in your pocket, which we've already established is really important to you.
100%, 100%. And it just that the reason why I say, and now when I say it, you got to understand that I'm being playful and fun, right? I'm not hard charging like, oh, this is the exact reason, like this serious intensity. My expression's light. Look, I do a lot of like, I teach this, right? The puppy dog. Some of you may have seen this before. For some of you that are new to this, like when you're talking to somebody, this is confrontational. This is not. This is very soft. This is a less aggressive posture, right? Leaning just slightly in. I call it the puppy dog, right? So then you can deliver things that are received better. If I'm standing and overbearing and very intense, that's going to be, I can use the exact same words. Remember, words are 7% of communication. That's it. 55% is body language. And the remaining 38% is voice inflection, rate of speech, where you put your pronunciation, things like that. So what I want to do with them is I'm going to say bold words, but I'm going to do it with a soft, friendly, welcoming posture. So it's almost like.
So can you demonstrate it one time for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So what would you like me to demonstrate?
This is what people say right before they hire me. That part.
So, you ready, Cody? I'm gonna get into character, and on you, I'm gonna look at you in my bigger screen. I've got two screens here, so it's not gonna look like I'm looking at you, but I'm actually really looking at you because this one's very small.
Okay.
So just give me the objection so I can just move into character.
Sure. So 6% seems pretty high to me. Can we negotiate a lower commission amount?
Perfect. You know what, Cody? I got to tell you, we're right on track for being working together and you being one of my clients, because virtually every client I have will ask that question right before they hire me. So I'm excited you brought this up, and let's have a discussion about that. And then I go right into it.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Smiling, warm, soft eyes, body language, very approachable, very welcoming. Now, what I'm going to tell everybody that's watching this on the replay or wherever, you got to practice this stuff where you can see yourself. So you're either filming yourself, you're looking in the mirror. I like filming. Now I'm going to tell you, I hated filming in the beginning. I absolutely hated judging myself and, all the things that we do, we make ourselves wrong. But the reality is that's where you're going to be able to see what you're doing right and wrong. And I'll tell you where it really stood out for me. I was coaching an agent years ago, and he was struggling on converting on listing appointments. And it's going to sound really freaking weird, but this really happened. I said, listen, I need you to video. I got to see what you're doing in there, because when we're practicing, and this is back where it was just over the phone. So he's like, fine. So he videos it. He sends it to me. And unbeknownst to him, at least a dozen times, he took his hand and he went in and he scratched his armpit. I know, right? Now he didn't know. He was just, he'd be talking to him. I got to stand up, and he'd be doing this, and then he'd talk to him, and then he'd do that. And I was literally like, and I called him. I said, did you watch the video? He goes, oh, I hated it. I'm very uncomfortable. I go, I get it. But what's going on with your armpit? And he's like, what are you talking about? I go, rewatch it and count how many times you scratch your armpit. I go, it's very off-putting to me. I could imagine what it's like to sit across from you and watch this happening over and over and over again. And it turned out it's just a nervous thing that he does. But we were able to break that pattern, right? So body language and how we make it softer and more palatable to people. Now, I'm a big believer in the entertainment value. I know, Cody, a lot of times you're doing stuff that's very serious, right? I could tell by the way we role play and the way we handle things. So you got to find your shtick that you're most comfortable operating out of. And at the same token, we want to really make sure our body language is warm and friendly.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, Joe, that I definitely am a little bit more of a clinical analyst type, but when you said that, the way you just demonstrated it, if we were truly in a listing appointment with my personality being as pure as I could be on who I am, that would not have felt salesy to me. So I liked it, and I'll be watching this replay. For me, what happens is when I know the reason and it doesn't feel phony to me anymore, then I can easily pull off just about anything. But until that happens inside of me, it just comes off horrible.
Well, it's because you're not, it's not congruent.
Yeah.
Right? You're out of congruency with your high level integrity, which is a compliment, right? And am I being off-putting? Is this just being a cliche salesy thing? And the reality is, for me, is I want to overcome whatever level of concerns they have in the easiest manner possible. So
yeah. And I want to second what you said about video. So I've been making these training videos for Synergy.
Yeah.
And it's been a really cool learning experience, because there's some stuff that I wasn't aware of, and there was other stuff that I thought was problematic that actually makes it kind of more natural. And so over the course of doing that and seeing what it looks like being the observer, you really do learn a lot from it. I totally second what you're saying on that.
Very good. So I see Dave Reichert's out there. He's got his cameras off, so he's either super busy or super respectful. So probably a combination of the two. So Dave, you're in and out of a lot of sales things right now. What are you working on? What can I help you with?
One of the things that I wanted to say earlier when you were talking to Michael about, MJ, working on his free throw when he was seriously, not to even come close to draw a comparison between me and my script skills and Michael Jordan, his basketball skills. However, I think I may have been on the bench. I would have made the team, right? If we did, comparison to comparison. And to your point of always needing to work on it, you overheard me calling and I got the fine and I did the reflex, oh, that's great, and then just motored through with the script, and I missed the opportunity to create a little more connection. And you gave me the great feedback, was like, oh man, fine. Well, sometimes fine means, everything's good and rolling along. And then sometimes fine means garbage. What's it for you? I mean, it was like, I sometimes wish you kind of had a headset on when I'm on these calls too.
Well,
Because
yeah, no, I think you're dead on, right? So what would you attribute that to?
look, when I pick up the phone, in my head, my goal is I'm calling to get an appointment, right? And sometimes it's like appointment or be damned, and that's really not productive all the time. It's a great way to be. However, you have to also be present in the conversation so that you can create a little bit of rapport at minimum, so that you can ask for the appointment more comfortably.
And I think the experience that you go through with another human being has to come into this somewhere, whether it be somebody coming through your open house, whether you're on a listing presentation, whether you're on the phone call like you had suggested. I think that human connection, and that only comes from being fully present.
Yep.
When we're in such a hurry to get the result, we are going to run over opportunities left and right. And like you said, they said something like, fine. Anybody who's trying to do anything else when they're on a sales presentation has already lowered the odds that are already stacked against them, right? So whether it be on the phone, somebody comes through an open house. If you're on your email, if you're on your phone, you're around loved ones and they're on their phone and you're trying to have a conversation with them and you can tell they're gone. You might as well shut up. And that's my thing around my wife and my kids. If we start a conversation, they pick up their phone, they start doing anything else, I stop. Not to gain control, but look, I don't need to talk to entertain myself, right? So the same thing for us. If we are going to be in a sales environment, we should be 100% focused on that environment at that time. Again, going back to what you said about fine, a long exhale before answering absolutely tells you there's something deeper. And the only way you're going to hear that is if you're present. So kudos to you, Dave. That's huge.
Thanks.
Steve, I saw you had your hand up, but Cody, were you going to comment anything?
Really quick, I was just going to say that I've found that in sales, it's very rare that you only get that one chance only to close. Like usually, even if it feels like you're going to get that one chance only, usually you get more bites at the apple, especially if you know how to set that up for yourself in the future. And sometimes I think that's what gets you the deal.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's not one big knockout punch, right? It's who you're being throughout that conversation that is naturally going to make them feel like, yeah, I want to work with this person, or I want to continue this conversation. Very good. Steve-O.
So one of the things I was thinking was, Confucius said that he who's good with a hammer thinks everything is a nail. And I think about, we have our own different styles that we communicate from. Cody is clearly, comes from a finance background. And so his love language is in spreadsheets, but not everybody you talk to is in that same mode. And so I'm thinking about if we have one way of answering a question, we probably are kind of missing it because we're not talking in somebody's love language. So for example, Cody loves the word, how much I'm going to net. You said how much you would put in my pocket. If my wife heard you say how much you're going to put in my pocket, she would think if it goes into my husband's pocket, it's going someplace else. And so for my wife, her love language would be in the bank, right? Mm-hmm. Or how much you can convert to gold or those kinds of things. And so is there a way that you very quickly determine their love language, as it were?
So you bring up two things that come to mind, first of all, for me right away. Number one is if you're with a husband and wife or a couple, whatever, more than one person, right? Whatever that looks like, is you have to be conscious of both, right? And so if I made the comment about putting the most money in your pocket, I may say that out loud, and then I will look at both of you and watch your reactions. 99 times out of 100, I will pick up something else from your wife, and I will immediately, again, because my job is to turn off all the other stuff, all the other noise that's going on, and be fully present in this moment and notice how your wife reacts to that comment. And I'm more than likely, knowing me, I will give her another option. I said, or what happens in my home is we find out what she wants to do with that extra money. And I would immediately defer, right? And that's how you get both people in. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, one of the common misnomers when you're on a presentation with a couple is that the one that's doing the talking is the one in charge, right? And so what we've got to distinguish is the one that's doing the talking is the mouthpiece. Now, sometimes they're also the one in charge, but what I've found is oftentimes the other one has the strings. And if you ignore one over the other, it is to your detriment. And so even though one's going to do 90% of the talking to you, you've got to make sure you're connecting with the other one and make sure they're enrolled and they're involved in the conversation, even if they're not saying anything. I'm telling you, more times than not, I've been in conversations where the guy's the big, boisterous, mouthy one, the wife is 100% driving it. Or the other way around, the guy's quiet and sitting there and he's just watching everything like he's watching, you know, a good detective crime movie, and he's making his notes and determining what he's going to do, but he's letting her run the show.
Man, I hope everybody is paying attention to this right now. This stuff is pure. This is pure. You gotta be implementing this stuff.
So I was on an appointment years ago where I arrived, the wife was there. Actually, it wasn't even the wife, it was a fiance. And she was there, and you know, she had called him, he was hung up in traffic, and he's like, go ahead and get started. I'll get there when I can. I'm hustling across town. And listen, I'm going to use words here. I don't mean this in any other way other than trying to explain to you a connection. Okay. So I literally had seduced her to a point of she was ready to hire me, right? Nothing more than that, but I fully had her enrolled, bought in, and an understanding. And then he walked in, and I'll tell you right now, I spotted it the moment he walked through the garage door into the kitchen. He turned and he saw her energy, and she was laughing and felt good and very good connection. And I saw like his energy was like, and I'm going to curse. What the fuck's going on in my house? Right. And I immediately had to defer all my energy back to him to get him to be okay. If I think in my mind that they're not both in on this, I'm done. He's going to run me out of that house. So you got to be looking at both, reading both. In this case, I turned to him and I immediately said, oh man, I've heard such great things about you, you know, blah, blah, blah. Now, for those of you that know me, when I go in somebody's house, I find unique things to get them to talk about. Everybody's got a picture on the wall or, you know, a fish or whatever, some piece, and I will ask questions. And I already knew there was a picture of him with family members, and they had been on some hunting trip. And I said, man, I've been wanting to hear more about that picture of you guys, because that scenery, is that Colorado or Idaho? I mean, it looks gorgeous. He started to talk. I immediately gave him all the approval he needed. I said, listen, I'm glad you're able to join. We have some things that we've discussed, but I want to see what's important to you. And I immediately took a back seat to him. At that point, it was okay. But if I had stayed on the course I was on, I already had her won over. In my mind, she was acting like the boss. No chance I was getting hired. Do you get that? All parties, all the time. You may only have rapport with one of them through the phone calls and everything else, through internet searches and everything else. They both show up. You better take the time to get to know both. Better take the time to get the opinion of the other. And if they say things like, yeah, you know, it just, she knows what we want. She knows what I want. I was like, okay, but you know, remember later, you can't get mad at me because she's buying what she wants because I've asked you for your input, you know, and be playful about it, right? Try to get them engaged. But by the same token, and Steve, I'll get to you in a second, the same token, I've gone into houses and shown houses, and I've looked at the husband and he's like, look at this game room. And I've looked at the wife and her arms are crossed and and I'm like, all right, time to go. And he's like, we haven't even seen upstairs. And I'm like, she's not going to live here. So unless you're buying 2 houses, we need to go. And he's like, well, what do you mean? Huh? Well, and she's kind of like, and I'm like, don't give her a hard time. She doesn't like the house. Let's go. But it's paying attention. Steve.
So it sounds like, I mean, I've always felt like this idea that opposites attract really only applies to magnets, but not to people. You know, that people hire people that are like them, that they like, or that there's an area of commonality. And it sounds like what you're saying is very quickly find a point of interest that you can both identify with, or a point of commonality.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to confirm part of what you said, but I'm going to debunk one of them. If we all got along with people we had something in common with, every realtor in town would love each other.
Well, that's true.
It's just not true. Here's what happens. What connects is common energy. So I know nothing about vintage cars, but I have been in more houses with kick-ass cars in the garage, and I will be like, oh my gosh, look, you know, and I just start stumbling all over it, and they go on, and what I do is I get excited about what they're getting excited about. And that immediately, that common energy of being excited about something creates a connection. What's interesting is later when they say, well, what kind of car do you have? And I'm like, I got a Lexus and just a new Dodge Ram. And they're like, well, that's kind of disappointing. I thought maybe you'd also have like a 53 Chevy Bel Air or whatever, you know, like it's the common energy. And I've done this with people, like they get all kinds of excited about their shotguns and they go on and on and on. And I know about this much about a lot of subjects, but what I can do is I can read their energy and I can get excited if they're getting excited. Does that make sense?
Getting them engaged in
Yes.
something that they're excited about and showing that you're interested in them. Yeah. Yeah.
And the converse is true too. If there's sorrow, right? Emulating the energy allows a connection. So if I come into a sales appointment, and I had a guy here that was on our team years ago, Dave knows who I'm talking about, but he walked into a listing appointment. They came into our office and we went out and previewed the home like a week or so later with just the husband. It's a divorce. And now both parties are coming in to sign the paperwork. And he walks into the room about 5 feet before me. And he says, it's a very exciting time. And I literally was like, oh, I have to kill him now. I literally cannot let him say another word the rest of the appointment. He went to go sit down in a prominent seat. And I said to him, I said, I'm not going to say, first name's Jeff. I'm going to say, Jeff, I need you to take a seat down at the end. I needed to completely remove him from this conversation because the energy we were dealing with was a breakup of a marriage. And I don't care what's going on. It's sad for both parties. They might be liberated with freedom after it, but while they're around each other in that moment, it's going to be tense. They're going to be on guard. They're going to be frustrated. They're going to be unknowing about their future. And I have to be connected to that energy. By creating that common connection on energy, we now have rapport, and thereby they trust me, they believe in me, we can now move forward. So when I go in, I try to go into every meeting on a scale of 1 to 10 of around an energy of 5. I can quickly move up to a 7 or 8, or I can quickly drop down to a 2 or 3. But if I come in at a 9 or 10, it's a very exciting day. And then I find out grandma just died. Now I got to get to a 2. It's very difficult. So does that make sense, Steve? Typically, though, if you do have common interests, that, like, say you're excited about, you know, skeletons on Halloween, and I have skeletons on Halloween, and I do. I appreciate when you put out skeletons. I'm always like, right on, Steve, the skellies are out again. That's an easy place for you and I to get excited because we're both excited about it. But even if I'm not,
Yeah.
I can get excited about your excitement.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. No, we're on the same page. I agree with you completely. What I was thinking is that what you did was you made a point of finding something that you can pull your energy towards that they obviously are interested in.
Yeah, nobody, look, I got a picture up here of a whale. Would I have that up there if I have any interest at all in that? If there was no meaning behind it?
No.
So there's got to be something.
Yeah.
So if somebody came in and said, dude, that's pretty cool. Tell me about that.
Yeah.
I might tell you about my friend Rich Gurman, who lives in Laguna Beach, that I paddleboard with all the time, that he took this photo and he won all kinds of stuff at an art fair. And I'm super proud of it. And gosh, I love it. And you could be like, that is super cool. So your buddy does that, right? You could just naturally get like on board with that. Now this didn't happen, but if I said, hey, that was one of my closest friends in the world, and that was the last photo he took before he passed away, I can easily connect with that same energy and be like, wow, like good for you for honoring your friend and keeping his memory in front of you at all times. Do you feel the difference in my response?
Mm-hmm.
So all I'm doing is trying to get something so I can connect energetically. So cool.
There's also that thought about authenticity as well. I mean, you can fake it, but you can't. People can tell, can't they?
Well, look, I'm just a human going to experience the emotion that they're experiencing.
Yeah.
Right. I would be sad if that happened to me. No question. So I can connect on that. Empathy. Right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
We can empathize with somebody, like that's a tough scenario. So good. Steve, I cannot thank you enough for bringing that question up. I sincerely mean it, because that is one of my favorite things to talk about. And Dave knows that we don't go into any meetings anywhere, anytime, even into people's offices, and spot everything that's in there and find out what we're going to talk about.
Truth.
Right? For lack of a better word, it's foreplay. Dave?
Yeah, no, I wanted to add and kind of loop this all the way back to what Cody said with that, with the, this is what people say just before they hire me, right? When it's on its face and it's just a group of words, it's one way. But when you're able to put some emotion behind it and you're actually in the moment, then it's not salesy, right? Just like your energy around both sides of the whale picture in the whale scenario. It's not salesy because, like you said, the empathy makes you human and you're being human. You may have the set of words that you know you're supposed to say, but that doesn't mean that you're just a robot and you're doing this to make a sale, so I just wanted to touch on that because it's true. You do it and it's why you're successful, and it never ever feels salesy because it's not. It's always genuine.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And that's what I would hope everybody would work on, which is why I say practice is so vital. Is, you're going to practice different emotions. The words, again, 7%. But can you pick up the different energy between my buddy, the whale photographer, super proud, awesome, lives in Laguna Beach, and then if the story had been that he passed away, you can pick up energetically the differences on that. So Steve, last comment, and then Cody, I think has a question.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, in acting, they tell you to, if you're trying to find an emotion, you have to recall something from your past to help you with that emotion, whether it's anger or love or joy or sadness or tears. And then it becomes authentic. And it sounds this back to this idea of authenticity is that we have to find a place where we are, we're reaching back into our experience to be authentic in the moment. You cannot fake, what isn't real.
Yeah. And for me, I think at least what works for me is I just put myself in what would that be like? Like if they lost, if their husband or wife just passed away. Like I've been on appointments, man. And I will tell you, like when you ask why are they selling and they say something like, well, our son committed suicide in this house and that was a year ago and we can't be here anymore. I mean, there is no level of preparedness going into that other than to imagine, like as a human being, like, you know what, I will look at them. I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to lose it, but I will look at them and say, that totally makes sense. And I'm 100% here for whatever you need as we go through this. Like they feel that, right? So cool. All right, shift subject. Cody, what else you got? I know you're over there cooking up formulas.
Uh, working on a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
So I do have some other ones, but I actually feel like this session has been like really pure. I don't want to dilute it all. It's your
Okay.
show, you can say, but if you want to wrap this now and we can continue, I can bring these to the table in our future sessions, whatever you think, but this one has just been like on the mark, I think.
I appreciate that. And yeah, I guess the way I would wrap this is, we've titled this the scripts and dialogues and things of that nature. And I'm going to go back to what I think I have said on every single one of these calls. And that is this: you cannot get into these spaces until you have learned to master what you are going to say. If I am hung up on what I'm going to say next, I will never be able to be available to connect with you on an energetic level, because I'm in here. I want to operate from here. My brain knows here's the 3 questions I'm going to ask right from the beginning. And then I'm going to go into this, and then I'm going to go into that. But while I'm in these 3 questions, this is where I'm at, and I'm completely 100% absorbed in what the answers are going to be, right? So for me in the beginning, it's okay, thank you for inviting me over. I took a quick look at your home, looks great. Tell me a little bit about this picture. Tell me about this piece of art. Tell me about whatever. They spend that time. I get the connection energetically. Great. All right, well, let's get into what you invited me over for, and let's talk about your sale. So remind me again, tell me, why are you moving? And then adjust, how soon do you want to be there, right? So I know the checkdowns are this. Then I'm going to tell them at the end of our meeting, 1 of 3 things are going to happen. Number 1, you have the opportunity to list your home with me. Number 2, you may decide not to list your home with me. Or number 3, I may decide not to take your home as one of the homes I sell. And just so there's no pressure on anybody, any one of those 3 is fine. Okay, boom. Then I'm going to go into the next thing, which is going over the market. So I've got all these checkdowns, but in there, I'm fully present and available because I know what's coming next. So Cody, when they bring up an objection, and I'm in the beginning and we're talking about why they're moving and where they're going and all that and what's important about it. And they say, oh, by the way, what was your commission? I'll say, great question. Typically people ask me that right before they hire me. So hold on, we're going to get there. I'll even write that down. Boom, ignore, it's off to the side. I'm going to where it's next, right? That's critical. So if you're not practicing, if you're not internalizing and working on your character, my hand gestures, my head nods, they're all rehearsed. I do this every time. If I'm going to say something to anybody and I want them to hire me, at the end of the statement will be, no matter what you decide, I hope that you decide to hire me. I'm going to do the same. I'm going to lean in. I'm going to nod my head, little slightly tilt. And I'm going to point. I'm sorry, I'm sitting kind of low, but my hand's pointing at me. It's pointing in, like hire me, right? All that happens. All that performance, all that is because I know what I'm going to say next, because I'm not freaking out about, I don't know what I'm going to do once I get there. And I tell people all the time, if you don't know what you're saying, then you're practicing it on live opportunities. And that's much more expensive. Much more. I'd rather Cody tell me, Joe, that was the worst objection handler that I've ever heard. And then I could cry for a little while. I could be mad. I could be frustrated. And then I could pick up the scripts and I can study and practice and then get back on the phone with Cody again tomorrow and say, let's see how it goes now. Right? And then, okay, yeah, that was much better. Okay, good. Now confidence is building. Now I know what I'm going to say and we move on. So with that being said, hopefully, and we'll do a little sidebar post call on this, but for anybody that's watching this on a replay, I really, really want you to get that this game of real estate can be so much fun, but you have to really lean into it as a game. You got to look at it from the game context. Like if you're a kid and you're playing, Cowboys and Indians or whatever things you might be enjoying, you would fully immerse yourself into that character, right? You'd run around the house with a broom as a stick, and that would be your horse, and you'd be galloping, and in your mind, all that would be happening. That's what we got to do as real estate salespeople. We've got to put ourselves in that place of, look, I'm going to own this. I'm going to absorb this character. And for many of you don't know, Joe D, the nickname, is a character. Who I am outside of real estate, I'm pretty laid back, pretty easygoing, but when it's showtime, when it's game time, Joe D needs to come to the stage. So create that avatar persona of yourself. So Michael, you might feel one way or another about, like, I feel like I'm an imposter. No, Michael Herman needs to have this alter ego, this avatar of what a great salesperson he would be and what that looks like. And then he's got to move himself into being that person. And then at the end of the day, you go back to being who you are, right? But the more and more you work on it, the more and closer that becomes to who you actually are. And now it vibes. But right now, especially for those of you that are early in the industry, is who you are as a salesperson doesn't really even exist yet because you're new to this. You've got to live it, walk it, define it. And that's when we talk about when we're connecting people energetically or even on an emotional level, like now you're all in. Now you're buying in. You can sit with somebody who just lost their husband that they've been married for 50 years, and you can make them feel comfortable and move them forward at the same time. So that's it.
All right. Well, thanks, Joe.
Off the soapbox.
I really liked this one, and my plea to Synergy is that you will use this time to bring stuff to the table like I have. Let's unpack it together here where it's safe and it doesn't cost you, just like Joe was just saying. So you're not doing it in the most expensive environment possible. And let's bring these scenarios to the table and let's use this time for it.
What's interesting is Ray was on one of our earlier calls, really brought some good stuff to it. I know Ray grew as a person in terms of this game and this ability. Steve, Cody, you guys brought stuff to this call today that stood out, and what makes this call. The hardest part for me is knowing what to talk to you guys about. I could do this all day long, but it's better if it's brought to the table of saying, here's something I want to work on. So anybody that's watching this on replay, get it in your calendar so I can help you. That's all I'm here for. I know this information. I don't need to talk about it anymore, but I would love to share it with you like so many people have shared with me in my career to make this easier. And you know what comes with easy? Money. They go hand in hand. When the game's easy, the money's easy. And for anybody that wants more money, might as well get some of that easy money. Hard money is a little bit more effort. So,
all right, very good. Thanks again, Joe.
Peace, guys.
The money.
Show me the money.